everybody. I'm Nona Baker, co-chair of MPN Voice, and welcome again to my regular vlogcasts. Today I have a very special guest. I've got Mary sitting here, and Mary has had an MPN for 41 years, and is going to tell us a bit about her story, because she was diagnosed as a young person. Mary, I long to hear this. You said to me you were diagnosed at 17?
Yes, correct. Yes, in 1983.
My goodness. Would you like to tell us how what led up to being
Okay.
diagnosed?
In 1983, I described myself as a very young, fit, very sporty person, and I had gone into hospital because I'd sustained an injury to my right knee, and post-surgery, about 24 hours post-surgery, I developed a DVT. And because of my fitness level, and I was extremely thin, and there was no real reason why I would have been diagnosed, they ran some blood tests, and lo and behold, I had a very, very high platelet count. And that was my beginning of my journey with ET.
Goodness. And what happened then? Because I mean, in those days it was very rare. I remember when I was diagnosed in 1991, I think they said there was something like there were 12,000
Yeah.
patients in the country. I mean, it was.
Yeah, I mean, I remember being sat in a very small clinical room, and there was myself and my parents, and being told that this was basically something extremely rare, hadn't seen that many young people, and they actually described it as an old person's disease. So you can imagine my thoughts and my fear and my upset, my parents' upset, being faced with something that I thought was going to completely change my life and maybe shorten my life. But here I am, 41 years on, and still doing extremely well.
And what treatment did you have when you were
Well,
first?
to start with, because my platelet count was something in the region of over 2,000, and I had a shot of, I think is it Valsalfan?
Busulfan, yes, yes.
Yourself, and then I went on to hydrocarbamide, and that was my sort of regime until I decided to start a family. And I had to plan everything, obviously. So it wasn't any spontaneous, like, let's have a baby. It was like planning things. And I then had to go on peg interferon, and fortunately I was able to conceive. And I then went on to have two healthy children, not without its scrapes along the way, because postpartum with my son, who was my firstborn, I had a sagittal sinus thrombosis, which is a blood clot in my brain. But I survived that, and I'm here today to tell the story. And I feel that actually, at reaching nearly 58, I'm at my peak. I feel really healthy, really well. So I just would like to share that story with people to sort of say, yes, it can be daunting, but the prognosis, in my case, has been excellent, really.
That's fantastic. And how often do you have to be checked with blood counts and?
I mean, it depends. I mean, with hydrocarbamide, while I was still on that, I used to be checked every 6 months because my platelet count has always been very stable, and I tend to respond really well. But then I came off hydrocarbamide because I was having issues with my skin. So my consultant said, let's try peg interferon again, which much to my I was dismay. I thought no, because I really didn't enjoy having the peg interferon during my pregnancies. But having said that, this new peg interferon, which is slow releasing, has absolutely been brilliant. And again, I only inject once every 3 weeks, and it's only 90 milligrams. So it really is a small dose, and my platelets are really stable. So at the moment, we still sort of touch base every 3 to 4 months.
That's brilliant, isn't it? But at 17, I mean, emotionally, when you were told something like that? How did you cope with it?
Well, it
Did
was
it?
devastating because there was none of these wonderful groups like NPN, none of these wonderful people like yourself, Maz, and where you can just sort of have a read and everything that I did read. Obviously, we didn't have much access to internet then, but everything I did read about ET was really, really negative, and especially about hydrocarbamides. The prognosis for people who were on hydrocarbamide was basically that you would develop MF and but as the years have progressed and I've had millions of chats with my hematologist, I was told, well, there's no reason why you can't go on and have a very healthy life. And as I said, I've had two, let's say, DVTs and a few TIAs along the way. But I think now that with all the knowledge and expertise and knowing how to manage myself, if, for example, I need to have surgery, the outcomes have been brilliant. I had a total knee replacement last year and I had no problems whatsoever. So I think the information now is absolutely brilliant, and the way where the knowledge that we have with regards to how to manage ourselves is so much better than it was 41 years ago. But you reach a point. I mean, my mental health did suffer, and there was a point where I needed to have cognitive behavioural therapy because I just kept being very negative about the outcome of my life, and I needed to address that. And to be honest, that really changed my life as well. Being sort of faced with something that was a rather negative aspect in my life and changing those thoughts and making those thoughts positive. And I think that was the biggest breakthrough for me. So it's not so much even the treatment, it's how you deal with it emotionally and mentally.
I think that's a very valid point. And I think the message is that, if you're a young person and you receive a diagnosis like that, reach out
Yes.
to talk to a professional
Yes.
about the impact on you emotionally, because there is definitely a school of a thought that, the mind and the body are very well, it's fact, the mind and the body are interlinked. And
Yes.
therefore it's really important to talk about what's worrying you.
Yeah,
Especially.
absolutely. I think one of the most important things I would say with my experience and 41 years of deciding what's normal, because having been diagnosed at such a young age, people say, is this symptom normal? Is this fatigue normal? But to me, my life feels normal because I don't know actually what normal is. And aside the treatment, I think the mental health side is actually far more important at times than the actual treatment side, because the two, I think, go hand in hand. If you're not able to digest what's actually happening with you, or emotionally say, look, I'm having a bad day, or I'm having a bad week, having a bad month, there's no shame in saying I'm not coping. And I think that's probably why I think for me it was so important to ask to become a buddy, because I just wanted to project that, because people generally, because it's not such a well-known cancer or disease, if you like, people say, well, what's that then? You look all right to me.
That's the great line, isn't it? You look
Yeah.
very well.
Yeah.
Which is
And
often the case. We do
like
look
a
well.
fraud. Yeah, you sometimes feel like a fraud because you're thinking, well, am I sick? I haven't got a broken leg, so I haven't got a cast to show anyone. So if you are struggling emotionally, you feel sometimes, well, I can't really talk about it because people don't understand. So having these groups are wonderful, because if you can't explain it to somebody in your family or to a friend who perhaps medically doesn't understand what's wrong with you, you can share that with people who are going through what you're experiencing. So it's great that we have these such wonderful forums and discussion groups and Facebook and Instagram. It's wonderful. But again, we need to treat it, because I feel with ET for myself, it's an individual thing as well. What I might experience might not necessarily be what somebody else might experience. But I'd like to think that the one that has is having a bad time, you can give them a positive outlook and say, look, you might be going through a rough period. It might take 3 months, 4 months to feel better, but you will feel better.
I think that's very valid too, because I think, you know, particularly for young people, and it's the fatigue that's the crippling thing.
Yes.
You know, when everybody else is going out having a wonderful time and,
Yes.
you know, having, you know, parties and
Yeah.
staying up, burning the candle at both ends. You know, fatigue is the hidden, real hard thing to cope with when you're young,
Mm.
because it's not tiredness. It's not, people don't understand it, I don't think.
Well, they also can translate it as being, oh, you've been really lazy. Why are you sleeping all the time? You know, because I love to have my little power naps. You know, if we would
Yeah,
fly somewhere and they'd all be laughing and I'd be having my little power nap in the
yeah,
corner, and they say,
yeah.
oh, God, you're always sleeping. But
Mm.
hey, that's how I need to sort of refuel myself, if you like. And there's no reason why you can't burn the candle at both ends, but just be kind to yourself. If you need to
Yeah.
have a rest. That's how I see it.
But you know, the other thing about it in the longer term, and I know you and I have discussed this, is looking after one's skin if you're a young person.
Yes.
And I've also had problems with my skin with hydroxycarbamide.
Yes.
And you know, it's there are lots of ways now of looking after your skin.
Absolutely.
In the old days, you know, we did go out in the sun without adequate protection. Uh,
Absolutely.
and you know, nowadays there are so many good products on the market. You don't have to go out looking completely covered in a sort of white
Paste.
mask. Yeah, paste. That's it. Paste.
You're absolutely right. If I could talk to myself and talk to my 17-year-old self again, I would say to myself, Mary, put your factor 50 on, you know, make sure that you're sensible in the sun, because I really had no clue that obviously I have my fair skin and fair hair, but I think that translates to anybody. If you're taking a cytotoxic drug, you need to look after your skin.
You do, and I think also the other thing is that drink plenty of water. That's the other thing,
Yeah,
isn't it? It's so
absolutely.
important because even if we're tired, you know, drinking water actually does
Well,
help.
I get asked all the time, oh, can you have, can I drink a glass of wine? What foods should I eat? And I always say to people, there isn't anything that I say you can't do, but do it in moderation. Obviously, smoking is a no-no. If you're sensible, then you'll know that that's not a really good idea. But as far as drinking and eating is concerned, everything in moderation. Making sure that your weight is always at a sensible, level, that you're drinking plenty of water. But if you want to go out every now and again and have a glass of wine, have a big blowout meal, do it, because that's important too. We're not, I hate it when people feel that they should restrict their lives, but I'm always mindful that I'm aware of what my condition is, and I should be aware of how to manage it and look after it. Because at the end of the day, it's down to me if I choose to, have a certain lifestyle.
I think you and I are both incredibly lucky to have had a fairly easy journey through
Yes,
an MPN because I do meet people that have a lot more symptom burdens
yes,
than
yes.
you and I have been talking about. And I
Yes.
never underestimate how
No.
debilitating that must be. But I agree with you about the mental thing to just um, find a way of helping yourself not get too down about it all.
Yeah, I just think that's so important, because people talk about mental health all the time, and the more recognizable diseases. But when you
Mm.
have something like ET, people actually do think you're an extraterrestrial, really. So I say to them, it's important that you don't punish yourself too much, and just love yourself, because at the end of the day, if you can't come to terms with what you have, then you're not going to sort of overcome those hurdles, because there will be hurdles along the way. I have had a few scrapes along the way. I'm not saying it's been plain sailing, but I'd rather forget about those negatives and just concentrate on the positives, because there are plenty of positives.
And I think also, compared with when you were diagnosed and I was diagnosed, there was very little in way of treatment. Busulfan was the standard thing.
Yes.
And I think that, the future is really bright for
Yeah.
MPNs
Yeah.
with all the scientific research that's going on now. So for
Yes.
young people, we've seen a huge change, you and I.
Yes.
And actually, even with the communication, like sitting, talking now, you know, COVID was simply dreadful for everybody. But what came out of that was we all had to learn how to use Zoom or Skype or to
Yes.
keep talking. And I think that's the important thing, isn't it?
Yes.
With anything rare, with any illness, you're not alone. You are
No,
absolutely not alone.
absolutely. And actually, I've learned to embrace, you know, this is part of me now.
Yeah.
I've lived with it longer than I can ever remember. You know, what's normal, what's not normal. It doesn't matter. As long as you feel that you can sustain and have a good quality of life, it doesn't matter when people start saying what's normal. Well, it's whatever is normal to you, to your needs. And that's what I would reinforce all the time.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. But Mary, thank you so much for this really reassuring chat.
Oh, thank you.
And, you know, I just think I can imagine being a young person and thinking, being diagnosed with a young age, some
Yes,
younger than 17. But there is plenty of hope.
there is tons of hope. And I actually hope, I always thought at 17 that perhaps there would have been a cure in my lifetime. But I honestly believe that these young people that are being diagnosed now, there will be a cure by the time you reach my age, let's say.
Oh, my age, I absolutely agree with you. I think, you know, that's it's just leaps and bounds it's coming on.
Yes,
You know,
yes,
the wonderful thing about, and I'd like to say this really, the wonderful thing about MPN Voice is it's one big, huge family of
it
people.
is.
And there are always people like you as a buddy, as you know,
Yes,
there are always people out there willing to help and walk alongside somebody with a diagnosis like this.
absolutely. I totally agree.
Well, thank you so much,
It's been my
Mary.
pleasure. I'm glad I was able to share my story because
Well,
it's so important to give people hope. That's the most important element.
absolutely. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.